Rupp for Bank Workshop, and I'm here to teach you how to make the color theory coasters from my new book, the Embroider Everything Workshop. We'll need some plastic canvas. You're going to make sure to look for the one that says that it's a 10 mesh canvas. That just means that we're going to be getting 10 stitches to the inch. I've already pre-cut my canvas to the size that we're going to need, which is 5 by 5, and I used my kind of junky non-fabric scissors to do this. For my felt square, which is the backing of the coaster, I used my rotary cutter. The reason why you'll want to get a rotary cutter is it will allow you to cut perfect squares. And for this project, we're using a thread that's known as tapestry wool. 2 skeins of each color. Also, we'll need some embroidery floss for attaching the felt. And because we're using thread, we're also going to need needles. It makes sense. And I have a couple of different needles for you. The tapestry needle, which is used for needle pointing. It has a large eye and it has a very blunt point. And you're also going to need a regular embroidery needle. It still has a large eye, but it has a sharp point. Now this needle is a size 9, and this is a size 18 tapestry needle. And all of this stuff is spelled out for you in the supply list in the book. So now we need to cut our thread. Let's start with the bright red. That's the center color on the coaster. This is known as a pull skein. It has a little free end on it that we can pull the thread off the skein. We want an arm's length, your wrist to your shoulder. This is the perfect length for stitching. I'm gonna grab my needle threader because that's gonna make it so much easier to thread the needle. And I'm gonna take my tapestry needle, which is the needle with the blunt point and the large eye. And then you just slide it right through the eye. Adjust the length so that you have a tail that's about 3 inches or so. As we stitch, we're gonna be stitching with just a single strand of the wool. We're going to have to do a few markings on the canvas to know where to start, and also we want to label where the top of the canvas is. I'm going to go ahead and cut just a small piece of artist tape using my regular scissors, and I'm going to write the word top. Okay, so now that I have the top, I just need to figure out where the center is. So I've got my ruler and my air-soluble marker. Again, the canvas is 5 by 5, so I want to find 2.5 along the width, and then I also want to find 2.5 this way. So this is my center point. If you'd like, put the pin right at that point. I've given enough extra canvas, so even if you're off just a teeny tiny bit, we're going to cut away. So that gives you a little bit of room to not have it exactly in the center. Let's go ahead and take a look at the stitch chart in the book. This is going to tell us exactly how to work the pattern. The pattern is done in a grid of 10 by 10 squares, just like our canvas. And if you look here, you'll see that there's a center point and also center edges. So we know we're going to start right here in the middle. We're going to be doing a stitch pattern. It's probably the #1 stitch pattern in needlepoint. It's called a continental stitch. And the continental stitch is worked from right to left. So if I look at my center point and I count out all the little red diagonals, I know that I need to start stitching 8 stitches over, and then I'm going to do a row of 16 stitches from right to left. All of the stitches are right-leaning diagonals. It's very, very simple to do. So now we're ready to start stitching. I'm going to go ahead and take out my pin, and I'm going to count over 8 stitches, and that's where I'm going to start. So now I'm ready to pull the needle through the canvas, and I'm going to leave myself enough of a tail, maybe an inch or 2, so that as I stitch, I'm going to be covering up that little tail, and that's going to be the equivalent of a knot. So I'm going to go from the lower left to the upper right, go back down to the wrong side, and that's my first continental stitch. Now I'll come over 1 stitch to the left, the next hole over, bring the needle through, and as I go back down into the canvas, I'm covering up that little tail. So once you've done about 10 stitches or so, you can usually cut away the excess wool. So I'm just going to flip it over, trim away that little tail. That's more than enough to finish off the end, so it's not going to come undone. And I've got just about 6 more stitches to go. If you do end up with a stitch that you're not happy with, it's super easy to fix. You just unthread your needle, use the back of your needle where the eye is, and just unpick. And then you can rethread and go back to stitching the work. So that's my first row. Now, the continental stitch requires that you turn the canvas for your second row. So I'm actually going to go upside down right now, turn it around, and I'm ready to do the second row. If I look at the chart, I can see that there are 2 more rows on top. that I need to work, and that will give me 3 at the top. And then I need to work 13 down. So all together, we're gonna have 16 across, 16 down. Now, one thing you're gonna wanna do as you stitch is you're going to want to keep cutting thread because you'll use up your arm's length fairly quickly, and then you'll need to weave in your ends to the back of the work. I usually try to work it in a few different directions to kind of confuse it, and then you're gonna trim it away. Cut your new arm's length and go back to stitching. It should look something like this. Again, it's not in the center, so if as you work you see that it's not in the center and you're a little bit nervous about it, this is correct. Now once you've done your first square, you're going to switch over to the burgundy or kind of wine colored thread, which is number 8204. So after you've done your second color, you're going to move on to your third color, and that's the blue, 8674. When you're all done, you should have 39 by 39 stitches. Okay, so let's pretend that this is a finished coaster. We want to cut away the excess, but leave a finished plastic edge. So you're going to take your scissors and you're going to very carefully, you've done all this work to make a beautiful coaster. You may want to take a moment before you actually start cutting. You just want to come in and trim away very close, but not through that plastic edge, like this. Okay, so now that I've trimmed away the excess canvas, I'm ready to do a stitch that's known as the overcast or whip stitch, which just means I'm going to kind of stitch around the remaining raw edge of canvas. So I need to cut an arm's length of thread again, so just wrist to shoulder, and I'm going to go ahead and thread my tapestry needle, and I'm going to do some stitching that is pretty much the same exact thing as the continental stitch. The only thing that's going to be a little bit different is as we round each corner of the 4 sides of the coaster, we're going to want to make sure that that corner is fully covered with wool. So to do that, we're just going to take 3 stitches into each corner. So let me start with this corner here. I'm going to bring the needle into the hole, give myself a tail of 1 inch or 2, hold it to the side, and I'm just going to keep stitching into the same hole 3 times. I always think that 3 times the charm. Now I can move on and start stitching around the side. So I'm just going to go 1 hole over, bring the needle through, and I'm just going to keep moving from right to left. And as I do that, the thread is going to wrap around the raw edge of the canvas. I have a finished coaster here that has the overcast or whip stitch all around the edge. So it's going to look something like this. Here's the wrong side. Here's the right side. It looks really pretty. It's all finished. So the very last step is just attaching the felt backing. And this time we're going to sew with the embroidery floss. The embroidery floss is really thin. We want this to be super, super tiny, and it's going to be the same type of stitching. It's going to be a whip stitch. So it doesn't matter if you're working with embroidery floss, sewing thread, tapestry wool, it's always an arm's length. Now the thing that's a little bit different about this embroidery floss is that it is made up of 6 strands. Tapestry wool is a single strand, this is 6. And we only need 1 of the 6. So you're gonna just pick apart the thread and look for single strand. It'll be about the same thickness as regular sewing thread. And you just wanna pull it. Here's my single strand. And now I can finally use the embroidery needle, which is nice and sharp. I'm gonna thread the eye of the needle and I'm gonna make a knot, trim away the tail, start sewing this on. So you wanna hide the knot, and you're gonna do the same stitch pattern. You're gonna do small whip stitches through the edge of the coaster, something like 1/8 of an inch apart. And that's it. You're gonna make your way all the way around, and you will end up with something that looks like this. I'm so proud of myself. So we did it. We successfully completed coaster number 1 from the Color Theory coasters. I love it. I hope you love it as well. If you enjoyed making one, why not make 5 more and you'll have a set of 6. Now that we're all done, let's see it in action. It works!